talk with the AHA Network, and is Ambassador Stephen Pifer, a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution and former ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. I'd like to ask you some questions about the upcoming visit of Vice President Biden to Ukraine and Georgia. Could you share with us your thoughts about the significance of the visit?
Okay. The most important thing about Vice President Biden's visit to Kyiv is the fact of the visit. What the Vice President's visit is going to be is a very strong signal of continuing American interest in and support for Ukraine. And I think it will be well received.
What are the priorities for this visit?
The main thing is the fact of the visit in terms of the symbolism that it conveys of a strong relationship between Washington and Kyiv. In terms of practical outcomes, it seems to me that right now there are not a lot of big bilateral problems on the U.S.-Ukraine agenda. Those issues such as Jackson-Vanik graduation, Ukraine's entry into the WTO, the question of optical media piracy, they were resolved a couple of years ago. So the focus in terms of substantive discussions, I think, are going to be on issues such as what can Ukraine do to better prepare itself to become a full modern European state. Questions like economic reform, how Ukraine might, with support from the outside, reform its energy sector. And I suspect that there will also be some discussion of relations between Ukraine and Russia, given Russian behavior in the post-Soviet states.
And how do you see this fitting into the overall U.S. strategy of a reset button, pressing the reset button with U.S. and Russian relations? And how does this impact Ukraine?
Sure. When I was in Kyiv a couple of weeks ago, I detected a certain degree of unease that the U.S. effort to reset, improve relations with Russia might somehow come at Ukraine's expense. I don't think this is the case. If you go back to the Vice President's speech in Munich in February when he announced the idea of reset, he was also very clear to say that this did not mean the United States would recognize a Russian sphere of influence in the post-Soviet space. And he also said that the United States would continue to support the right of countries such as Ukraine as sovereign states to determine their own foreign policy course. But I think the fact that the Vice President is going to Kyiv will be taken in Ukraine as a sign of continued American support, and it will be well received in that regard. So it's sort of a parallel. You have an effort to rebuild relations or improve relations between Washington and Moscow, but also a signal that there's going to be a continuing strong relationship between Washington and Kyiv. I'd add, by the way, too, though, that I don't think people in Ukraine should worry about better relations between the United States and Russia. First of all, it's clear to me that the administration is not going to sacrifice Ukraine's interest in that. But historically, over the last 18 years, when there have been better relations between Washington and Moscow, it's actually given Kyiv more freedom for maneuver in terms of trying to draw closer to Europe and Euro-Atlantic institutions, and it's taken some of the pressure off. So improved relations between Washington and Moscow, I believe, will be a good thing for Ukraine as well.
In closing, could you share some commentaries of possible future outcomes, such as do you foresee something similar being formed as the Gore-Kuchma Commission or other vehicles for further bilateral relations?
Well, at this point, I'm not sure what will come out of Kyiv in terms of specific outcomes. And it may be a little bit difficult to achieve specific agreement, in part because of the political difficulties within the Ukrainian capital, specifically the differences between the presidential administration and the cabinet of ministers. One thing, though, that they may discuss would be what kind of structure would govern U.S.-Ukraine relations, would be a mechanism to manage that relationship to make sure that it was moving in the direction that both sides would wish. One idea I've suggested in the past is that it might make sense to revive the Bilateral National Commission that was chaired in the 1990s by Vice President Gore and President Kuchma. It seems to me that if you brought that mechanism back, you would probably have to make a bit of adjustment, perhaps having the Ukrainian President and Prime Minister co-chair, because executive power is now divided between the cabinet and the presidential administration. But that might be one idea for a structure to manage the relationship. It's an idea that I know has been considered by the administration, but whether they're prepared to move forward on that, we don't yet know.
Thank you very much for your comments, and we look forward to seeing how the visit unfolds.
Okay.